Happy Monday.
Happy
It is
Monday.
industry update. How are you?
I'm very well, actually. I'm very excited.
Well, tell me why.
I'm just getting at it this week. I'm back to fundamentals, and I liked one of your suggestions for the conversation today about
Yep.
leaning
So
in.
don't tease it yet. Don't
I
tease it
won't,
yet. Let's
but no, I'm excited.
all right. So here's the question. Let's run through the numbers and then we'll get into it. So one of the cool things we've been working on is we've actually kind of redeveloped this website, therealestatestats.com. So obviously, this guy's got a little more hair than you, Lee, but we'll take it. But one of the cool things, if you click on the state of Georgia here, it's going to take you to all our Georgia statistics, and you can go by county. So before, as the world evolves, you start out with a spreadsheet, and then it ends up looking cool like this, and you get to click on these fun little buttons. But if I'm going to click on Fulton County, we'll start with Fulton County. And the spreadsheet turns out to look really cool on the graph, and it looks really good. So I'm actually going to uncheck all these lines and start so we can kind of just see some stuff here. Hey, Rick, how are you?
Super good. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm in my other office. Had to set up my tech. Let's go.
There you go. So active listings in Fulton County on a 7-day running average certainly looks like we're coming back up. So obviously we had quite a bit of inventory in 2021. The market heated up. We sold the inventory. We got real low right there at the beginning of 2022. And then it usually climbs in the spring market. And then kind of peaks out in the summertime. But we got real low again at the end of this year. And the hope is that inventory continues to climb between now and June. And one of our big conversations today is going to be around inventory. But for the most part, it sure looks like that spring market upward trajectory on inventory. If I'm looking at just pending contracts, if I can get that to click there, the green line and the blue line are pendings. And obviously right around here was the start of the year. And you can see an upward line on pending here. You can see an upward line on the pink line of inventory, but you can also see an upward line on the green line of active under contract. So it's just an easier way to show, hey, our spring market is ramping up, right? And we're seeing that. If I jump over here to closings, and let me take some of this noise off the graph for a second. If we just look at closings, how do you feel about that chart? If I just take, let's do this. So this is what basically the last 3-4 months looks like in terms of closings. How do we feel about that in Fulton County? And I'm not going to go this detailed on every county. You can do that on your own. But what do you think?
Looks optimistic.
A gentle increase.
Gentle is probably a good word, right? So I heard Rick say optimistic. You're saying a gentle increase. Maybe elaborate, both of you.
Rick, you want to go first?
To me, given in light of the information, the news, the current market's climate in general, economically, if we're seeing a steady rise in home sales, how could that not be an optimistic reality versus, when you take into account interest rate hikes and, again, the typical news that's on every night? To me, it says consumers are still committed to buying homes.
100%. And it's not as steep of a spring market climb as I would hope. Yet, if you're looking at the leading indicators, which is the active under contract and the pendings, in the same time period, if I just kind of do that, they all kind of follow each other, right? And they're all on that upward trajectory, which I think is important to look at.
Can you add active listings in?
Yeah, of course. And by the way, y'all can do this too, just by going.
Yeah, I've been playing on my screen.
Yeah, there you go.
What we're seeing is
active inventory doesn't always follow the others because it's certainly inventory kind of drives the rest of them, right?
Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing anecdotally, we've been obviously looking at sales meetings for Inside Perimeter. More properties are leaving the market than coming on currently.
Right.
Anecdotally, we're seeing escalation clauses. I received emails this weekend about how to write them. Jason's dealing with them. Multiple offers. The interest rates are not really scaring people. In fact, I think the idea that interest rates could eventually end up higher may be motivating some of the buyers that sat on the fence.
Don't steal the thunder yet, Lee. Don't steal the thunder. We're getting.
I get carried away.
All right. So anyway, let me run through just some of the numbers so we do it. 633 active inventory, 135 under contract, 339 pending, 269 in the closed category. Pretty healthy numbers. If I run out to Cobb County, you're going to see some of the same numbers here. We've got 358 active active listings. 92 on active under contract, 227 on pendings, and 213 on closings. That's the highest 7-day total in closings Cobb County's had since, well, let's just say for a very long time. Oh, they had 213 back in October. So good 5-6 months. So that's a good indicator, right? If I run over here to the cab, we looking at 341 active listings, 89 active under contract, 204 pending, and looks like 168 in the closing category. We had a little spike last week. So maybe we're averaging around 175 a week in DeKalb County on the closings. So pretty healthy numbers, right?
Sure.
All right, so total opinion. Here's my question of the day, gentlemen. And you only get one. Would you rather have, as a real estate professional, would you rather have more inventory or a lower interest rate? Which would you choose?
I actually did, can I answer with 3? So sure. I asked Pam, RPM Pam, because I happened to be on the phone with her and I thought it was a great question. Thank you, Brett. She agreed with me. And then I asked ChatGPT and it didn't know.
Oh, well, that's because ChatGPT only goes to 2021.
So I would
Carlin said more inventory. James said lower rates.
I prefer
50,
more inventory
50 right now.
Inventory, Pam said inventory. Ultimately, that will potentially help affordability. Obviously, as a realtor, I want to have inventory to list and to sell. Yeah. And interest rates at this level, historically, they're average. They're not bad. People have gotten used to them. So yeah. I can sit quite happily with between 6 and 7 interest rate.
Yeah, everybody, the smart ones on here are saying refinance later. Give me the inventory now. I am in that camp, but I can tell you, you could argue the interest rates drive the sales.
Well, do you want ChatGPT? Do you want to hear what
I want Rick. I want Rick Hale.
I would say it depends how high the interest rates go.
Okay.
I mean, I think in an ideal world, we'd reach somewhere, a state of equilibrium, which means, 4 to 5 months of inventory, which means buyers and sellers aren't at a particular advantage or disadvantage and allows for a little bit better reality around fair trade and pricing. And it doesn't create an abnormal market for buyers or sellers. So yeah. I think inventory would be a good step in the right direction since we've had it, or lacked it for so long. But I do think at some point interest rates rising may take, remove buyers from the market, which with higher inventory, fewer buyers, might spin the direction a little more aggressively than you'd want if it was extreme.
Well, I'd almost argue that a little bit because I think the lack of inventory is creating such a price appreciation that it's taking buyers out of the position to actually buy real estate. Where I would take a an extra point in interest over having to pay $50,000 cash to a first-time home buyer to get into a house. And I think that's why inventory is going to win in this conversation, in my opinion.
Well, you also said an extra point, not 5 points. I said that was my qualifying statement. It depends on what higher interest rates means. A point all day, every day.
All right, let me pop something up on this.
Lead, fire away.
For giggles, I posted the Chat GPT response just so everyone can see. It was interesting. I just asked the question. And the second thing is I showed a screenshot to Brett earlier. The list price to sell price percentage ratio is backtracking at 2018, 2019, 2020 levels. Yeah. So with back from 110% of list price to sell price to 97. So things are normalizing. This is a more normal spring.
All right. So I had Stephen, our cyberbacker, put this together for me. And one of the big conversations we've been having lately is the opportunity of now. And so let's say I buy a house today for $250,000. Well, the reality is I lock in my cost of living for the next 30 years. Now, it's going to go up slightly. And that's why this line goes up slightly, because taxes and insurance go up over time. But the other truth is, if I lock it in for the next 30 years, I'm going to have an opportunity to reset it lower if I refinance. But let's say I never refinance. My debt service in this analogy is locked. Now, my amortization, the red line, you realize first couple of years you're paying mostly interest, and then it's going to curve down over 30 years to eventually pay that loan off. And the white line is the 4% appreciation line of where the value of real estate goes over time. So, gentlemen, that $250,000 house today at 4% appreciation over 30 years goes to $810,000 over 30 years. So in theory, the difference between the white line and the red line is my equity. But if I was buying an investment property, the same thing happens. I lock in my debt service, and then the purple line is if I was renting the property, and it's going to have an escalation on top of that. So my cash flow is going to grow over the next 30 years as well. But the point of this is, if a buyer tells you today, hey, I want to wait a year to buy a house, or I want to wait till the interest rates come down, what is that? When they start this chart 2 years from now, what looks different? It probably is going to start up here higher on the price point. So now your chart is going to look different, or it's going to extend the amount of time for that equity to grow. It's the time value of money, right? I'm just trying to show it in graph form so people understand that regardless of what the interest rate is, if you don't lock in real estate today, you don't start this process over time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's a great graph.
Another way I can show this analogy, which I'll use Midtown since Lee's on the call. But if you look, hang on, I got too many windows open. If you look at our trend report, and this is Midtown's trend report. So this 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. In 2015, the average sales price was $245,000. So let's say in 2015, I said, hey, I'm going to wait 2 years for the rate to come back down. How much money did it cost me? It cost me almost 50 grand to wait 2 years to buy the same average house. If I waited 5 years, it cost me 130 grand. So this is an easy way, just using the math of our offices. By the way, wait, what's that, 7 years? $200,000 because I waited 7 years to buy a house.
I do like the I think I did a thing chart, because everybody knows this inherently. How many conversations do you have? Oh, if only I had. I wish my cousin did it in LA, in West Hollywood. It was, I wish I'd bought this house 4 years ago. And now he's living in a lesser area for more money. And, everybody knows it, but if you can point it out with the chart, something like that is
that's the conversation every agent's got to have in their back pocket right now is this is what buying real estate looks like today, and this is the lost opportunity of waiting.
I think
being able to explain
image on their phone.
Yeah, being able to explain that. So we're working on that. You can have this. I'll give it to the team leaders. We can get
leave what's not included in that discussion that should be part of your discussion with a potential buyer is that front-loaded interest that you pay early on is all tax deductible and actually will impact your debt service or the net cost of carrying that house. So that's a really important factor when a huge portion of your payment is tax deductible. So if you're factoring cash flow,
we're doing a state of the industry update here in the next couple of weeks. And I'll make this a part of that presentation so everybody has all that information in the dialogue to talk about what buying real estate is. And Rick, we'll make sure we get the tax part in there. And
one more factor.
The best-selling author of Stop Selling, Rick Hale, for the tax.
Right. Well, the other thing to factor is that as you're, that $500,000 potential gain is tax-free if you're a married couple and the tax code doesn't change as it stands today. That's massive, depending on your tax base. And, that's a few hundred extra on top of the obvious gain you got simply by paying off your house and gaining appreciation.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to shift gears for a second. So last week, the Fed did what with interest rates? That's a live question. They bumped it a quarter point.
Raised them,
right? All right, we didn't expect
the graphic.
Yeah. So here's the 10-year Treasury note, and we didn't expect them to bump interest rates, and it's not mortgage rates; it's the Fed rate. But two, my belief is that it actually didn't affect our mortgage rates. I don't think that bump last week did much. I think it was already priced into the mortgage rates. And here's my argument. If you look at the U.S. 10-year Treasury note, right around the beginning of March, we were hovering at about 4% on the U.S. Treasury note. And for first-time listeners, this is the most correlation to mortgage interest rates from a government security that we can show you. So when this goes down, rates go down. When this goes up, rates go up. So at the beginning of March, we were hovering just over 4%. And right around that time is when the banks crashed and the SVB crashed and all that stuff. And immediately this rate dropped from 4% down to just under 3.5, which means it actually brought our interest rates down. And I made comment that I believe the bank crashing might have saved our spring selling market. But then the Fed went and raised this rate, which kind of threw me for a curveball. But here's the interesting thing. We're still at 3.5 after they raised the rate. So today, the Treasury is still at 3.5, which tells me that the mortgage or the backed securities it was already priced in. So I'm not expecting interest rates to really move that much based on what happened. So I checked this out. I just Googled mortgage rates today. And right now on for fair, I'm on bankrate.com. The top offers for a 30-year conventional are coming in at 5.8. The national average is coming in at 6.85. If you go back to the beginning of the month when the 10-year Treasury was over 4, the rates were over 7. Now that Treasury note's come down to 3.5, we're seeing mortgage rates 3 3/4 ish, 3 7/8, something along those lines. So I actually think that Fed bump from last week was already priced in to our market. If I drop this down to a 5-1 arm, we're still seeing, national average on a 5-1 arm with a 5 on it at 5.7. At one point, that national average was 5.88. but we haven't seen the 5-1 arm go over 6. So it's quite interesting just to kind of play with these things and look at how they're related. If I move to a 15-year, national average is right over 6, top offer right over 5. I think what's interesting is the gap between the two, but that's another conversation. What do you make of that? Did you expect rates to go up this week because of that Fed rate?
That would be a common assumption. I mean, subtle. I don't think, it's subtle though. I didn't expect them to skyrocket for sure, but 1/10 of a point, maybe.
Maybe a blip.
Yeah.
Not necessarily sustained.
100%. All right.
A lot of the lenders I talk with, everyone feels pretty confident about the rates where they're cruising. And I think I read somewhere that a decent number of people expect by the end of the year the rates will come down. I'm not sure by how much, but again, I think most people are getting comfortable where they're at. They're used to the rates being in the mid-6s. It's not so scary. Sellers are agreeing concessions. People can buy down the rates. So I think that gives some people comfort when they're out there buying houses. They're actually able to negotiate other things.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's run through a couple of these other topics. Bank turmoil could spark modest recession in second half of the year. We've kind of been saying this. We're expecting the real estate market to actually be a little hot temporarily between now and probably through the end of June, maybe even through July, August. We're expecting the second half of the year all bets are off, right? Like we don't expect it to be hot, but we're expecting it to be stable. They're calling it a modest recession, which I love word choice in how they write these articles. But here's where I think it got really interesting. And notice this isn't the top title, but it should have been. Fannie Mae economists say downturn won't rival the 2008 financial crisis, but jumbo mortgages and construction loans could get scarce if small and mid-sized regional banks tighten. So now here's what you need to understand about the lending industry. Construction loans and jumbo mortgages tend to be perceived as slightly more risky than a Fannie Mae backed mortgage. So typically those loans are always done by the local banks, the mid-player bank. So if the banking industry takes a hit or gets tighter, you're actually going to find it harder to get financing in jumbo mortgages and construction loans. And that makes all the sense in the world based on what the banking industry is doing, right? Now, are they failing? No, some are over leveraged and they're getting squeezed. But I can tell you, if I'm a president of a bank or I'm sitting on a underwriting board of a bank or I'm on the board of directors of a bank right now, I'm probably being a little cautious based on the current climate. And I think the where you're going to see it is in jumbo mortgages and construction loans. Thoughts?
I think you're right. And it's the risk reward of throwing long balls, I guess, to people who are at the cusp of their capacity is more dangerous to a small and mid-sized bank. They're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
So 100% agree. And if construction loans become more difficult and challenging, obviously that'll wipe out a lot of speculative home building in certain markets and at certain price points.
Yeah.
And that'll affect supply and demand.
And I agree. I think they don't have a choice but to tighten up just in case, another bank fails and there is somewhat of a run. I think with SVB falling like that, I think a lot of banks just they're tightening up a lot of the things that they're doing, especially on riskier assets.
Yep. So it's interesting. Just pay attention. I'm not saying it's absolutely going to happen, but I think the second half of this year is going to look a little different than the first half of the year is going to look. And we never know until we get upon it, just like I didn't expect that Fed to bump that rate yesterday. but we're starting to see some home buying incentives come out. And if those start to come out, I think it could be a really good thing for our industry, right? Like, was it Freddie Mac announced a first-time home buyer down payment assistance to help close the gap between diverse homeownership, right? Like that came out last week. I think it was in last week's industry update. So it's certainly the government has the ability to play different things throughout our industry, whether it's interest rates or first-time incentives or whatever, to change the course. But as things sit today, that's probably a decent prediction, I would think.
Brett, how would you navigate our communication with, luxury buyers or even luxury sellers when it comes to the possibility of tightening?
If I was trying to get a luxury seller off the fence, I'd be putting this article in front of them.
Yeah, it's not going to get easier. Right now, it's probably at least in the next season. But I mean, the hope is the luxury buyers got capital and cash. They've got credit, and they've, so if you have cash, credit, in a good history, and of paying back your debts, they're going to loan you money. It's just they're scrutinizing different, like they did in 2005, 6, 7, 8, that led to the debacle we dealt with in that cycle of downturn.
Yeah,
it may affect the aspirational luxury section more than true luxury.
What's that?
People can have what they want.
Well,
the example I gave is, if you've got someone buying $1 million or $1.2 million house, they're probably using a loan. If you've got someone buying a $3 million house, they're going to do what the heck they want. So they're really two different types of buyer. If it's getting harder to borrow the money, then yes, if you're selling a house for 1.2, sell it now. If you're a buyer, you might actually wait around a bit and see if anyone gets caught with their price too high and has to come down.
Yeah. Anyway, one more conversation.
The only other thing I'd say is local banking relationships become more important as things tighten up for a luxury buyer. So instead of having all of your accounts in 8 places, if you show, loyalty and capacity and they've got strong deposits, they're excited to talk to you because fear of losing you actually matters.
100%. I'm going to let everybody read this article on your own. It's on Inman. Lean times require you to lean in. There's one thing I wanted to point out, and it's called this 200% life. And I'm going to give you the analogy I've given agents for years, is if you used to call 100 for sale by owners, 10 of them would take the call, 5 of them would let you go present a listing marketing agreement, and you'd end up selling 2 houses. But you knew if I called 100 for sale by owners, I would eventually sell 2 houses. That information caused you to go through the pain of calling 100 for sale by owners. Well, what this 200% lifestyle is you realize at some point in time, where to go? You got to do double the activity to get the same results. So if I told you, Mr. for sale by owner prospector, that you used to call 100 to sell 2 houses, you might need to call 200 today to sell the same 2 houses. Would you do it? Would you put in double the effort today to get the same income in your pocket at the end of the day? That's what leaning into a 200% lifestyle means. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's a really good article because it does go deeper than that. It talks about non-financial as well as part of your life. And there's obviously the required Gary Keller quote in there. But the way I looked at the article, there's a Russian proverb I read somewhere else this morning randomly. If you chase 2 rabbits, you will not catch either one. Mm-hmm. And the Keller quote is about focusing on an activity and doing that hyper effectively. So it's not doing less. It's just focusing where you put your effort and maximizing there as well. It was a really good article.
Sounds like my March Madness board. I think I was picking 2 people to win and nobody won. So it's all good.
So piggyback off of that.
It's a nice reminder to not give up before you win the prize, that inside of every behavioral strategy or habit, there's an algorithm for success. And the question is the market serving you a layup or is it a half court throw? And so right now we're looking at longer shots, and it takes more to hit them. And so just don't quit before the magic.
Love it. And
how do we navigate efficiency versus more effort, as far as, you know, for that example, for sale by owners, doubling the amount of contacts we make versus finding a more efficient lead source? Like, how would you say to navigate making those decisions?
I think you have to step back. You actually have to look and analyze your work and decide where your efforts are best applied. The idea is not to throw spaghetti at the wall and try everything. So yeah, for me personally, when I'm in production, I'm not going to make expired listing or for sale by owner calls if I haven't fully maximized the work with my own SOI, my sphere of influence. That's where I generate the most value for money. I can spend my time and get the biggest return. So I think everyone's answer is going to be slightly different, but it starts with taking a step back, taking a breath, and looking at what you have in front of you.
Yep.
It also means tracking results so that you have benchmarks that allow you to A/B test.
Track, trend, implement.
There you go.
There you go. Happy Monday, gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Good to see everybody.
And ladies. All right. Bye.
Thank you.